It's wonderful to be here this evening. I missed, because of another engagement, I missed Vince. I got here halfway through a marvelous speech by Guy, who is a patriot for Europe. I think that's the best description for him. And someone whose interventions since the appalling day in June 2016 have kept our spirits alive. And it was good to listen to Tobias as well. And indeed, the fact that this European movement doesn't have party boundaries. We make an exception in the case of reform, I think, but they were. Not to be exclusivist by any means, but just to show good taste. And it is a source of strength that we, and I say this as a tribally partisan 82-year-old who's never been anything else, it is a source of strength that regardless of our party affiliations or lack of them, that we are together in this effort, not only to assert our values and our convictions as people in pursuit of justice and upholders of democracy, but now having to defend our convictions and our values, and hopefully doing it more assertively and convinced which would have been if he'd been up against employers. It was the fact that nothing was worth thinking about, advocating or developing unless, in his terms, it had a bloody Union Jack on it. And that was there right at the start. Fortunately, those instincts were overcome and were succeeded, I have to tell you, friends and some comrades, by complacency. Decades of complacency, which reached their, would it be nadir or zenith, on June the 23rd, 2016, when frankly, in my view, our people with our opinions, our convictions, our perspective of the future and of reality in the world never made a serious effort to get the gut of the people, the soul of the people, to comprehend why the European Union existed, what it did and didn't do, and what its future could or would not be, how much it cost, how little it cost, who it benefited, who it was ranged against, what security and opportunity it afforded the rising generations. We never really made a serious effort. And even when those efforts were made, and I listened to some really noble and elevating youngsters trying to make the case throughout that campaign, they were distorted or neglected or ignored entirely by our entirely free, dispassionate, and objective media in this country. The fact that, by coincidence, of course, much of the print media is owned by tax exiles who give us lectures on patriotism may have something to do with the absence of coverage and the distortion of the realities of the European Union assiduously for decades. That isn't what eventually produced the, I nearly said the kamikaze vote, but I'll be polite and say the leave vote. But now I can only resort 8 years afterwards, 7 years and 11 months afterwards, to Shakespeare, whose mother was Welsh, by the way. Important to remember. There is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads on to glory. And that were the words of a potential assassin before battle, years before they contrived to murder Caesar. And I have to say, in our country now, the tide is rising. The tide is rising because of the number of people who recognize the harm and the penalties and the costs of that decision in 2016 and the way in which it's been compounded by an idiotically bedraggled Brexit ever since. It's worse than it need to have been. Disappointed, distressed, devastated as we were in June 2016, it could have been alleviated, mitigated in a variety of ways, not least by simply rejoining EFTA. But that was much too simple. And so we went into the abyss of dishonesty and distortion, of insult to intelligence in the years that followed. And that continues to be perpetrated. You only have to pick up some of the tabloid news, all of the tabloid newspapers today, and see that intelligence, the reality of what surrounds our people, no matter where they live in our country, or what their level in society or economic prospects are, they are being insulted because they're being lied to day by day, edition by edition. And unfortunately, even the objective media, who really do strive for dispassionate and factual reporting, the broadcasting media in our country, who I greatly respect, indeed I admire, have to unavoidably echo the predominant voice of the print. They try to escape it. Many of the most fastidious of those highly talented journalists. But nevertheless, you can hear the resounding call of the front page, of the editorial, of the fat headline, and the distortions and downright lies, it must be said, that go with it. But the tide is rising. There are people who fervently voted for leave in 2016 because they'd been taught over 40 odd years that the source of so many of their ailments and ills and woes and disadvantages and desertions of deindustrialization itself were a product of our membership of the European Union. It was always rubbish, absurd, easily disproved, but it never was disproved. All the great pro-European speeches made by pro-Europeans were, generally speaking, made on the other side of the river English Channel. The river English Channel. Damn, there are rivers that are wider than the English Channel. And we are separated from reality by that flow of water, which in some places is so shallow you can walk through it. I haven't tried. I mean, I would have tried, but I know that the son would have said, Kinnock fails to walk on water. So I didn't make any serious effort. But that's accumulated. And the second reason why the tide is rising is, God bless them, Celia's generation, the changing generations. Sorry, CECILIA. My granddaughter will never forgive me for getting that name wrong. But that's the reality. Those who voted in their young age in 2016 only voted profoundly, conclusively in one direction. And as the polls are taken now, and as the opinions are asked now, the level of commitment to wanting another referendum, another opportunity to choose, that's what they really want, and of wanting to vote for re-entry into the European Union is rising. It's remorseless. Time is on our side. And time really matters, because those of you who are old enough might cast your minds back to the early 1970s, when I was campaigning, of course, against the common market. I can go into the reasons for that. They were pretty stand-up reasons. I was wrong. But the only thing I ever got really right in my life was marrying my wife. That's, and after that, I realized what an error it was. But the British people, fortunately, had voted by a 2/3 majority to remain in the European community. And so I proceeded with some difficulty to persuade my party, some of them with devout quasi-religious belief in being outside Europe, as if that was geologically possible, to convince them that our future was in the reversal of our policy. Took quite a time, lost some friends, made some friends, generated some enemies, which was never a particular problem. My wife used to say I could start a fight in a room by myself, but that was never true. It's never true, of course. But the fact is that my party, I'm proud to say, did become the biggest, most pro-European party in the United Kingdom. And we made friends, not just friends here, but friends with those people who were our cousins anyway. Willy Brandt, Willy Brandt, and the leaders of the other European community countries began to trust us, and they were willing to work in real cooperative alliance with us. Helmut Kohl, not of my politics, but of my aspiration, they were willing to work with us. And that went across the continent. And it was a decent place to be. But those who were against it, right from the early 1970s, had developed and nourished their sectarian detestation of abroad. Not colonial abroad, not nostalgic abroad, not imperial abroad, not USA abroad, or in Chilean abroad under a fascist dictator, but Europe abroad. It was further away than any other part of the universe. And they organized, and they argued, and they stuck to their case, and they contributed, and they got supported by those tax exiles. And lo and behold, they took command of their party. Astoundingly, because I recall when the Conservatives were the party of Europe, and not just under Ted Heath, but before that and after it. But they took control. There was a 30-year coup, and it took some organizing. I say this European movement, with its non-partisan membership and purpose, with its basic values and its objectives of European development, has got to do much the same thing. We've got to become partisan for the future, for our children and our grandchildren, and for the ages beyond, on two grounds, not just of idealism, or indeed understanding of history, or global acknowledgement, like Tobias laid out for us earlier. but because of utility, usefulness, and realism. The facts of life, the facts of global life, the facts of continental life, the facts of local life, down to streets and factories and banks and families. That's where the future lies. And it can be built. We have to develop that new relationship, new because 8 years have passed since the people voted. 8 years. 8 barren years of reduced investment, of chaos in migration, of devaluation of the currency, not only against the euro, from which we get about, 54% of foodstuffs, but against the world's energy currency, the dollar, a reflection of the view taken by international capitalism of the condition of the United Kingdom in the wake of our detachment from our nearest proximity is vital, biggest by a huge margin, market. So we've got to negotiate and secure agreement. And we've got to do it almost with a mosaic, with tiles, on veterinary agreements, on energy, on the environment, on visas for business people and school kids and students. Steps, small steps, that together gradually make big strides, above all on security. Because the reality of this world is what Tobias spelled out earlier and what everybody acknowledges to be the case, of a degree of division which is a reversal of logic. Science and the environment and the fragility of our planet should be driving politics and people and business and common sense together. And instead of that, because of the distortions of dictators and the stupidity of myopics and the nastiness of nationalism, we're being driven apart. So it's up to that young generation to alter the future. I'm past it. They've got it. They've got it. They understand it. And they will do it.